tables would be laid out, and she would have lemon and he wouldn't, and he would have two blocks of ice and she wouldn't, and he would say 2 fingers or 1, and he would measure the gin by the fingers. And so I always knew that and at Christmas time, of course, my grandparents would do the same, and we were offered a little tipple of sherry when I was quite young, and I always knew that it was a coming of age when I was able to be given a drink, and of course I stole it before I was before I came of age.
Those Schweppes bottles full of creme de menthe.
Exactly.
Oh, they were wonderful.
So and from a very early age, I learned that I had a disease, but I didn't recognise it as a disease. But in New Zealand, growing up, it was very much a case of rugby, racing, and beer. But for the ladies, it was still, closing time at 6 o'clock and the 6 o'clock swill, and it was, the public bar was not a place for ladies. But I didn't drink like a lady. I never drank like a lady, and I drank to get myself completely obliterated. Because of the pain that I was experiencing from things that had happened to me in the past, and what I continued to the fact that I continued to offer myself to painful and dangerous experiences. So alcohol for me was an escape, and eventually I found Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was many painful years before I finally had enough. I was sick. I was tired. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I was lucky. I went online and I found the internet had online information about alcoholism. I read it. I got into a chat room. I met somebody who is now still actually living in Abu Dhabi, who basically talked me into going to my first AA meeting. Which was in Hong Kong 10 years ago. And I started to get well, and I had, identification with other alcoholics, and I got myself a sponsor, and I eventually did the steps. And part of the, I got to a stage where the 12th step is about, having had an experience as a result of working these steps. Of a spiritual nature.
What are the steps? And is it spiritual? Is it religious?
It's not religious, and it's a very interesting program, but it is a 12-step program. It was founded by Bill W. And it's just celebrated 80 years. It's very well known in the United States, and there are 170,000 AA groups in the world, and there are 117 countries in which Alcoholics Anonymous has a group. So, you know, the 12th step is having worked your way through a number of steps, which I can happily guide you through.
Yeah, please.
Very quickly. Well, I mean, they come in parcels. You know, it didn't take me very long to realise that my life was unmanageable and that I was powerless over alcohol, because when I drink, I don't stop. I had recognised very early on that in fact, what I was trying to say earlier was that when I drank, I always wanted another drink. I didn't ever drink like a lady. There was no cut crystal glasses. It always, you know, one was never enough. And I prided myself early on being able to drink men under the table, and then that wasn't very pretty. But I knew early on that I didn't have an off switch when it came to alcohol. And in fact, my life had become manageable, and I was powerless over alcohol. If I wanted to stop,
When did you know this? When did this realisation come to you? That was just before
It
you stopped, or for many years before?
I had known for many years that I was powerless over alcohol. I would often say that I didn't have an off switch. And in fact, the very last drink that I had was in the company of your wife.
Ex-wife.
Ex-wife. And it was a public holiday, and I had 3 or 4 bottles of wine. And
Were you the 3 or 4
Yeah.
bottle stage?
quite commonly, and I put my kids in the car and drove home.
Oh dear.
And in blackout. And that night I went online and I found someone in Alcoholics Anonymous, and as I say, he talked me into going to my first meeting. So the first step is just simply to recognise that I was powerless. And I knew I was powerless. I knew that when I had one drink, it would lead to a second. I never put the cork back in the bottle. Never. And I had got to a stage where not only was the cork not going back in the bottle, I was looking for bottles of anything that I could mix together. And I don't think my now ex-husband even has any idea the degree to which it had reached. He would go to bed and I would continue drinking late at night. And, you know, Hong Kong expatriates in those days, 10 years ago, when people left, they gave you their booze. They couldn't take it with them. and many of them had booze of all sorts of different colours. I mean, we had blue and we had green and we had, stuff that nobody would normally drink. So, creme de menthe and blue. Curacao would sit in the cupboard for, 10 years, and then it would get passed to someone who was not leaving by someone who was leaving. And so, of course, I had, and I think when they know you're an alcoholic, they give you their booze. So I had a big collection of different things, and I would mix them up, and I would just drink to obliterate myself. And it's hard to know whether the chicken came before the egg or the egg came before the chicken. But my alcoholism was causing my marriage problems, and my marriage problems was causing my alcoholism. There was no question, there was no separation. I don't know where the separation occurred, but the separation definitely occurred. But actually the separation didn't occur until after I got sober, because the first thing my new sponsor said to me was, work the steps and don't make any rash moves for a year. So I stayed married, and I was grateful for that advice, because it gave me an opportunity to get to know myself, and then to decide that the husband that drove me into Alcoholics Anonymous was not my problem. My alcoholism was my problem. So the language of identification going on over there. And so, then knowing that I'm powerless, I need to find power. And the second step...
Especially if you got that control thing going on, Megan, that must have been driving you crazy.
It was absolutely unspeakably difficult.
Right.
And I couldn't control my alcohol. So I had started controlling absolutely everything else.
Everything else. You must have been beautiful to live with.
Yeah, I'm sure you remember those days.
No, well, see, we're not aware. And you say everyone left you your booze because we know you were alcoholics. No, I just thought you were
She's
fun.
a party girl.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you.
Well, you know how I drink.
Actually, in the latter days of my drinking, what had happened was, and it's very interesting to analyse this now 10 years later, but I mean I have taken a good serious look at it over the years. My husband was so fearful about everything that was going on in our lives. We had young children. By then I had twins and a son and a stepson, and the kids were young. And he didn't know if I was going to get home alive. He didn't know if there would be dinner on the table. He certainly didn't know whether I was capable of managing finances, which I wasn't. And I would, I would make rash purchases. We're going to Boracay on holiday. tomorrow. And so, you know, when you're a person who's, you know, living with an alcoholic wife and you don't know about Al-Anon, you try to control everything, right? So you have a wife who's out of control, and so you become the controller. And so, you know, there's a lot of dynamics that start to happen. Alcoholism. Family disease. It's not a disease of alcohol, it's a disease of reactions to alcoholism. And everybody is affected. Children are affected. I had, because of my background of self-abuse and abuse, and we were talking about it earlier, I had a fear about how I would behave with my children. And was very, very afraid to be intimate with them in a normal, motherly way. I didn't know how to be with my children.
Because your mother was never with you?
Not in
that way.
Not in that way. I mean, she was a marvellous mum, and she was always there with, you know, cookies on the table when we came home from school. But no, I don't remember having an intimate discussion with her about anything.
Right.
Ever. And I think we have the most amazing. Intimate discussions now.
Really?
She's 83, and
Right, so that's hands. When you get old, you don't give a shit anymore.
probably.
You just go, whatever, come on!
I think it was probably around the time I got my tattoo that she realised that
And when did you
she'd
get that?
lost. Just before I got sober.
Oh, really? So you're well in your 40s, that's good for you.
And yeah, so you know, my husband had taken control of everything, and I fought that.
Of course. If you've got that control thing, man, there's nothing worse than someone
Someone
trying
else
to
taking
God.
control. So, so my way of controlling, my way of having, the only thing I could control really was how I drank, not how much I drank, but how I drank. And so I controlled, and I, you know, control is probably not the right word really, but I contrived. To create circumstances where drinking would be possible. So having 25 people for lunch on a Sunday was...
Oh, is that the reason we
Why?
were all surrounded at your house? It wasn't that we were that popular, it's just you needed an excuse to get the cork off the bottle. Really?
Well, I like you, Jack.
I know I love it, Megan. We've always loved you. No,
But-
I've always loved it. It's the
But
old.
it gave me an opportunity
Right.
to be the host.
The hostess
and
and
the
largesse,
creative
yeah, blah blah
person.
blah blah.
And you know, I built a house around being able to entertain. If you remember when I think it may have even been before I met you, but we cut a hole in our kitchen so that we could have a table outside and I
Outside
could
there,
be in the
yeah.
kitchen inside, and I would always have the bottles, make sure that you know the wine was in the fridge cooling, and I would be serving and I would be creating, and I would never decide what we were going to eat until the morning. I would just decide on an idea, a theme. You know, it might be black and white, so I would decorate the table, and then I would go down to the markets or the supermarket and decide what we were going to have. And then I would just come home and I would create.
Right.
Music on, bottle of wine, and off I'd go.
And so you'd have the wine open before the party started.
Absolutely. I
All right.
Or I would have had a bottle of wine before you turned
Oh,
up.
really?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Be creative.
Oh, I know. And that's my
Without
excuse as
it.
well.
And it's really interesting because I never ever, I don't know if you remember this, Jack, but I never served dessert.
Dad wouldn't register.
You
with
probably
me.
don't remember.
Mm.
But because by the time dessert came around, I was just too pissed. to
You'd
think
lost
about it.
interest by that point.
So I always had themed
Yeah.
tables and you know lots of
It
stuff.
was
going
always
on.
great fun. We always let you had a great house there,
Yep.
and it was the hole in the wall. And I mean, we always remember that. So, and there was always different people we hadn't met all the time. So it was always fun.
So my memories are very. But I had wonderful friends. But the interesting thing is that as soon as I stopped drinking, I stopped being invited anywhere.
Right.
So
And what was that? Why do you think that was? Do you think people thought you'd be judgmental, or you weren't going to be any fun, or what was the? Because you can still talk without alcohol, as you have proven.
I have a very high vocabulary. No, I think what happened was I created all of the social opportunities to drink, and I did it with much aplomb. I mean, my Christmas parties were famous. In fact, I remember one year, several years in a row, we had, if you remember, I don't know if you remember coming, but we had 200 people for a Christmas party, and I had a live nativity scene in the garage with the arrival of Jesus and baby Mary on a donkey and goats in the garage.
I remember the goats. I must
Remember
have
the
been
goats?
there.
Don't you
I
remember the
don't think we were there for Christmas. I think we came to see everybody, and then the what do you call the fault line
snow.
fox,
I had
and then the
snow.
snow machine,
Hey,
blah
I
blah
didn't
blah.
have parties. I had events.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And you know, I don't know why you don't. You should arrange events. You should bring in the people like the Doobie Brothers and stuff, and do a. event thing.
So, but you know, to be perfectly honest, events like on the scale of professionally run events take a massive amount of technical know-how. I just had the ideas.
Right. Well, you amassed the technical know-how as well, because it did happen, obviously.
It did, and the live nativity scene, I have to say, was probably the zenith of my
the peak before sobriety came, and it all stopped. Can't do shit now.
And somebody said to me at that event when as guests arrived, I don't know if you remember this, but as guests arrived,
Megan, I was
assigned
probably
them.
My face as well. It's Christmas.
But I
was probably
roles.
trilling up half a bottle of whiskey down.
I had a box of costumes
Right.
at the front gate, and as people arrived, I gave them a role and a costume.
Right.
And you're going to be an angel, and 10 angels, and you're going to be a wise man, and here's a goat.
I'm
to
glad
hold,
that
by
wouldn't
the
be
way.
me. I don't do
the
dressing
shepherds.
up.
You're going to be a shepherd, and here's a goat, and to hold. And Gail and I had got the goats from the stable up in
Yes.
and we put them in the back of the car. And the only way to get the mother goat in was to put the baby in, and the mother goat just jumped in, and it got delivered to the garage.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the curtains parted, and the whole nativity scene was there, laid out in front of everybody with wise men and goats and shepherds, and someone turned to me and said, "Megan, what are you going to?" Next year, make Jesus walk on water. And I loved it. But it ended because nobody could compete.
Mm.
Who the hell was going to invite me over for Spag Bowl? You know what I mean? Like, somebody said that to me once. We don't invite you because you go absolutely nuts.
Really? See, as a guy, that would never cross. I don't give a shit. I'm obviously not going to be doing the
Jack, you never
nativity.
invited me for dinner.
Oh, not at my place yet. Oh, but that can happen. I've got a
But
rooftop
I'm
now.
looking forward to
I've
a
got a
show.
rooftop now, and well, it's my turn for the bike club in January,
Fantastic.
so you can do that.
So it became very lonely actually.
Right.
So having realised that my life was unmanageable, that my entire life revolved around alcohol, that I would manage situations so that I could drink, and manage people. So that I could drink. No offence, I love you dearly, but
Yeah, I know I've been managed most of my life, but I refuse to have it.
I would worry about going to someone's house in case they didn't have enough alcohol.
Oh yeah, got to keep the Well, but Gail never had that problem.
Never.
That was
I always
alright.
knew
Yeah,
where to
the-
find
the-
knew
yeah.
where to find the
And there was
alcohol at
always
Gail's
plenty
house,
of
and it was
ours.
always good. But once I made the decision to give up, I didn't actually think it would be forever. I just
All right, you thought you were just going to put
Well,
away, dry out, and
have
then
a
go
little bit
back.
of a spell.
Oh dear.
And someone said to me, "Do you think you can stop for one day? One day, that's all, And I'd never stopped for one day. I hadn't stopped for one day.
Ever? Since when? When was the last time
Well, I
you'd
think
go
there
without
were
a drink?
periods when I was expecting my
Yes.
children. And that I had stopped, but that was probably because I just felt like I was so ill, But you can rest assured that I was drinking fairly quickly as soon as I had them. And So no, I don't really recall periods
Right.
in my life where I didn't have alcohol.
Every day.
Pretty much. When I lived in the Solomon Islands, I made my own tonic
Oh,
water.
that would be just a total
It was
excuse
pretty
to
difficult. Well, we had the gin, but we just didn't have the tonic. So I crushed up quinine tablets
Mm.
and made my own tonic. And of course, we brewed our own beer.
Of course.
So, and I would try anything. So, you know, there was never a time when I really didn't drink. I just had periods where it got more out of control or less out of control, but it was always out of control. But having, you know, abrogated responsibility for myself, my husband had taken responsibility for the family, and it took me quite a long time to really nail that, to understand that. But I persevered, and you know, the second step of Alcoholics Anonymous is.
So what's the first step? Tell me
The
again.
first step
It's just
is
to admit you have a problem.
Admit that we're
Right,
powerless
okay.
over alcohol. And then being powerless, you know, I need power. I needed to find power. And I found that initially in the group.
Right.
I found that if I went every day and I called someone every day, that I didn't drink that day. And that I felt better. And after a couple of weeks, as you know, because you were around at that time, people started to notice there's something different about me. I was looking slightly different. I had better colour in my face. And I hadn't told my husband that I'd stopped drinking, which says a lot about the condition of our marriage, because he hadn't actually noticed. And you know, but by then I was in the grip of a power that was greater than me. I had stopped drinking, and I didn't know how I'd done it, but I just knew that on a daily basis I hadn't
You
done
could
it,
do it.
and that I had surrendered. I think that was the most
Yeah.
important thing. I'd surrendered, and I had learned that if I surrendered every day for one more day, that I wouldn't drink again that day, and that's
Day at
how-
a time, that's
yeah,
the saying.
that's what I did. And so step 3 was made a decision to hand my will and my life over to that power greater than me.
Okay.
Now,
Which one? Was on is.
at that stage, I didn't know.
So were you looking for spiritual?
The
Answer
word God
of
is
God,
used in a
mhm.
lot of the steps. It is actually, but it's always couched with God as you might understand it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why Alcoholics Anonymous has been available to people who are Muslim, Hindus,
Yeah.
Jews. You know, that's why it's worked so.
Mind you,
so
Muslim
well.
alcoholics, they're kind of hard to find.
Absolutely not. In
Oh, is
fact,
that right?
in Iran, Alcoholics Anonymous is one of the fastest growing fellowships in the world.
Isn't that fucked up?
Um, it was brought into Iran by NA, Narcotics Anonymous.
Right.
And of course, people go to an NA meeting and then they admit they might have a little bit of a problem, and then they realise, oh my gosh, I've got a little bit more of a problem than I really wanted to tell, and actually I drink. And that's, Alcoholics Anonymous is huge. And in fact, that comes us back to Russia.
Right.
So through the steps, the 4th step is simply...
What's the third step?
The 3rd step is made a decision to
Right,
turn our
decision.
will in our lives. And we haven't done anything yet. 3 frogs are on a log.
No, it starts with the
and
decision. It all starts
one jumps off. How
Uh-huh.
many? One decides to jump off. How many are on the log? There's still 3, right? So we make a decision, and I do that. every day. I make a
Do you?
decision.
Every day you
Every
have to,
day.
you
I
get up and you
a
make a decision not to drink.
Not
that
to
day.
drink today.
So you've got to do that even 10 years later.
Yes, I
Jesus.
don't have to do it, but I choose to do it.
Yeah, well,
Because,
it's
you know,
working for you.
if the day gets rough, then
There's no, the decision.
it's not an option today.
Yes, it's not an option today.
It might be an option tomorrow,
Mhm.
but it's not today. So I make that decision every day. And the fourth step then is we look back through our past, and for me that was very challenging. I went back all the way to that little girl who was 12 years
Who
old.
do you do that with, Megan? And is that something you have to do yourself, or
No,
do you do it with a mentor?
it's something that you do with a sponsor.
Mm.
You do your fourth step, which is made a thorough and searching moral inventory of yourself. Not of someone else, but of yourself.
I
And
bet. A lot of people come unstuck at that one.
it's the jumping off place for a lot of people. And it has been the jumping off place for me, actually. I had a few stabs at it. I didn't want to be thorough, and I did not want to be honest.
No.
And it was a tough one to face, because at what point do you tell yourself that a 12-year-old is not at fault for being sexually abused? At what point do you say it was okay for you to then put yourself in danger, to accept yourself as an object of abuse? It's a tough one.
Yeah.
And I have, in the last 10 years, I've worked with people who've been in much worse abuse situations than
Really?
I ever.
Is it more common than I could possibly imagine?
I think it's very, very. common, Jack.
The abuse thing.
I
That's
think
just
it's very
terrible.
common.
As a guy, as a man, I think that's
But I think it's a
terrible.
cultural. I think it differs in cultures, and you asked me about Russia, and I have done for the last 4 years. I've been going to Russia and Mongolia and working with
So it's
predominantly.
Mongolia you go to.
Yes, I go to Russia and Mongolia and India. I'll get to it in a moment. So yeah, it's a difficult one, because there is a point where you take a thorough moral inventory of yourself and realise that actually you weren't at fault. And that then leads you to have to accept that you believed you were at fault, and therefore you behaved in ways that
What
later affected your entire life.
What is it with women and guilt?
Guilt, yes. Well, I'm not
Well,
even a Catholic.
No, but what
But
is
I
it with
see a lot of it.
women and blaming, self-blame, self-guilt? Guys, we don't do guilt. We do pointing at everybody else. We don't do,
Well, again, I think it is a lack of power, a loss of power, and I think as I have gone through my recovery, and I've done the steps now many times.
what, you do them again and
again
again?
and again and again, and in fact,
Is it just a repetition
and
based?
why not?
No,
It's,
why not? Absolutely. If,
it's an onion. You peel off
Mhm.
the outer layer and you find another one, and you peel off another layer and you find another one. But if you don't do them for a while, you grow another skin. So,
You find, okay.
Joan of Arc is one of my a person that I
love the film.
yeah, well, in fact, I've never seen the
Have you
film.
not seen the film with the girl who looked, what's her name?
No, Uma Thurman.
No, the it doesn't matter. The name will come to me.
But she had her soldiers confess all their sins before they went into battle, because she believed that it gave them inner strength and positive. if they felt good about themselves. I mean, if we're dragging around baggage, we're not going to feel too good about ourselves. And if we're dragging around a feeling of shame and guilt, then we can't be the people that we were meant to be, and we can't be the best that we can
Best
be.
version of yourself.
Yeah. So steps 4 and 5 are best done with a sponsor.
So 4's the self-inventory.
Inventory.
5.
And 5 is sharing.
Sharing with,
Yes.
so tell somebody basically.
Yes. Hard,
These,
right?
these two must be hard, eh?
Well,
Yeah.
I had a tough time, and I have heard the 5th step of many, many people, and the sense of relief that comes from sharing that burden. And it's interesting because I shared with my sponsor things that had occurred to me, even had happened to me even when I was a very young child, that I'd done, that I had been carrying around, and just the act of sharing them was a release. I'm not a Catholic, so I don't understand the
it's a religious
confession of-
experience or not, but the
It's not a
the
religious
unburdening of it. I mean, I've had experience
It's
myself
freedom.
and with others. Not
a sense of freedom.
But does everybody who's in it, did you find that everybody has something they need to tell or share? Everybody has an issue somewhere that is the primal or privy cause of what everything they've been through and their alcohol.
I wouldn't say it's the primal cause of their alcoholism, because I believe that alcoholism is a disease, and it is a disease of craving, which leads to an obsession of the mind. It's a physical malady, in fact. And if I drink a glass of alcohol right now, I can honestly tell you I know what the reaction will be. I will get the phenomenon of craving, and I will want another glass. And I will struggle with that, and my mind will become obsessed. And I've had that experience in sobriety of accidentally eating alcohol, eating a brandy-laced piece
or
of cake
tiramisu or something. Yeah,
tiramisu.
yeah.
So I know what that craving
And immediately a taste
it's
will give you the.
absolutely sets it up, yeah. And then I can't let it go, and my mind will start to fascinate around alcohol. So if I don't have the first one, I will never have the second one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And the
well,
only
that's-
thing I can control on a daily basis is that first one. And if I don't set myself up for failure on any particular day, I won't feel that alcohol will be the problem solver. So if I sort my life out a little bit and face it and clear up the wreckage of the past, I don't have as many reasons to drink.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like I need a drink.
Everybody has a reason to drink.
Well, sometimes not every diabetic needs to eat sugar, so I don't need to drink. But I've also found that I don't need a reason to clear my my plate in a way that alcohol could. So 5 and 6. 6 is look at our part really, and look at our defects and areas where we could do better. And some of my areas where I could do better are that I feel not good enough. I tell myself that I'm not good enough, and so therefore I will act in ways that make me feel better than, which leads me to be kind of bossy and sometimes a bully, and often talk over people, or very urgent in my expression, or there are many things that I've learned about myself that actually come from not feeling as good
from low
as,
self-esteem rather than the opposite might.
and that if I look at it, moving house every couple of years, new friends, my dad changing jobs, lots of things, abuse, all of that stuff, I think lead me to sometimes feel less than. and the counterbalance is I want to feel better than.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding that as the way that I am helps me a lot.
And one.
And of course, my relationships get better.
Yes. Well, as soon as everybody can talk about the past and bring up where everything started, then everybody takes a different perspective immediately.
And then, of course, the way that you can fix that is you go out and you have a chat with people that you might have harmed. So I have done that. I have cleared the wreckage of the past, and I've gone and spoken to family members that I may have hurt. I've spoken to my ex-husband about making him feel worried, actually. You know, we're given him cause for jealousy, not jealousy, but given him cause to be fearful that I... and that I might not come home. So I've spoken to him about that, and I have told him how my own fear led to behaviour that caused him to be fearful. So that's about the 9th step. 8th and 9th is recognising where you might have hurt someone, and the 9th step is about going and admitting your side of the street, not theirs. I mean, he did things that I don't particularly like too, but recognising my part.
It all starts with you. You can.
And then that's it really, and that takes you through the first 9, and then on a daily basis having a look at it. Now I've cleared the wreckage of the past, I can look at myself on a daily basis. Not always. It's not a great. You know, it's not always a negative checklist. Actually, it's important that I think, well, today I did something good. I gave someone a little bit of a pat on the back and a bit of support. You were in my office earlier and you saw me giving some praise to my staff, helping someone who's having a more difficult time at the moment than I am. That's a good thing. I'll put that in my checklist as a positive. And we do a little bit of an assets and liability checklist, and I try to do
every day.
I try to, but I'm not so good at it. And then I want to get closer to a power greater than myself, and so I do some meditation, and that's the 11th step. And you don't have believe in God to do the 12 steps, but it helps to imagine that you're not in control, and for me, control being an issue, it's good for me to remind myself that there is a power greater than me that kept me sober for 10 years. And having had that experience of being sober and having done the steps and knowing that I can be free of a lot of the guilt and shame that I carried around with me, I want to carry that message out. To other alcoholics, and that's what takes me to the 12th step, and what has taken me to Russia and India and Mongolia, and that's what I do.
And specifically with Alcoholics Anonymous, or with the organisation that you do this.
Yes, I've been privileged to be have been able to work in service for Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've when you first get sober, you can barely front up to make the coffee. I didn't have any responsibility at home. It had been taken away from me because I wasn't responsible. So the first thing I did was I made the coffee for the group, and I bought the biscuits and made sure the coffee was set up so that when someone came, and there was
And
had
there's
to be there early.
is there a group every day in Hong
Yes,
Kong, depending
there are many
chapters.
groups. In fact, there are
And
14. Groups in Hong Kong. So
every day they'll meet.
Not
if
every
you
group
want.
doesn't meet every day, but there are meetings
Every day if you need to go to.
And I've recently come back from a trip to New York, and there's a meeting on every corner, every hour. So it's.
And is alcoholism a huge problem in America? Because they are so hypocritical about drinking and everything.
Alcoholism's always been a problem, but it rises and falls depending. Alcoholics Anonymous got really kicked off when the Wall Street crash happened.
Was it as old as the
So-
1920s? scenario.
Absolutely. I couldn't take responsibility for myself, so I started to take responsibility in the group, and then that led me to service positions throughout Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was very, very fortunate to be selected to attend the Asia Oceania service meeting in Russia, which got me kicked into Russia in 2013, and that's the zonal meeting where representatives of all the countries in the zone, and in fact there are 70 countries in the Asia-Oceania zone, and we meet, not all of us meet, but a few of us meet every second year. And then in 2014 I was able to go to the World Service meeting, which was held in Poland, and I met the representatives of countries of the world, and we talk about how we can best serve the underserved alcoholics, how we can make Alcoholics Anonymous available more for women in particular. And this last year, I've just recently come back from the World Service meeting in New York, and there were 61 delegates from different countries, many from South America, most of them men, and there were 12 women, and we formed a group of past women delegates, because we can only go twice. Our term is finished after 2 times, and we have to make way for the next people to come and do service. And
there are always people coming through. I'm assuming
it's not always easy to get people to do service at that level, because it's it's quite a commitment.
Yes.
But we talked about how we can make Alcoholics Anonymous more available for women, and how we can encourage women into service, because at the end of the day, Alcoholics Anonymous is really about an alcoholic talking to another about their experience. It's not about a program or it's more about sharing experience. And the first time I went to Mongolia, I went prepared to talk about Alcoholics Anonymous, and I came out of my room in the hotel, and there was a lady saying, could I come to a meeting? they took me, and there were 7 women lined up, ready to tell me their stories, their 5th step, their deep, dirty, dark, horrible stories. And they couldn't tell anyone else. I was the stranger from out of town. I was the safe person. And I said, "How many are you?" And they said, "We are hundreds. But we can't tell anybody else." And you've got to understand that this is a community that lives largely in family groups and GERS. Many of them are nomadic, and that alcoholism, as I said, is a family disease. So many of them are the children of alcoholics. They've been abused, they've been
it goes down the generation.
and they've been neglected.
Right.
And so many of them had alcoholic mothers who didn't teach them how to look after themselves. So, you know, the shame that they experienced from personal hygiene that went, you know, amiss to incest to, you know, terrible things that happen to them, causes them to drink. And, you know, they drink to hide the shame.
Just to dull the pain. And
to dull the pain. And this is the case in Russia as well. I'm not going to say that every Russian is an alcoholic. They're not. Alcoholism, as I say, is a disease that I have, but you may not. I find that when I drink, I can't stop. Many people find that if they have a drink, it's okay. They can, you know, they don't need another one. So I work very much to help women who are alcoholics and who I can't. It's the same as teaching someone how to fish instead of feeding them a fish.
Yeah.
I said to them, I can't hear 7 5th steps. This would take half a day each, and I'm only here for a couple of days. But I need to help you to understand how to sponsor each other. So I taught them, and many people have also come back to Mongolia with me since, and we have conducted sponsorship workshops.
I know they started. Talk to each other now.
Yes, it's beautiful. And many of them can't admit their shame. They can't admit to another person, but they can admit to themselves. And we get them sometimes to write it down and to burn it in a fire.
Right.
And that's, you know, we help them to understand that just getting it on paper is good. And if they can get that release, then they can talk to other people and share those experiences. And so in the last 12 months, I have, it's not an I program, it's a we program. You know, we, meaning others, and I have been to Russia, and we have conducted 12-step workshops, and we have taught the teachers. So one of the projects that I'm working on at the moment is to go to Iran. And
to go to Iran.
Is to go to Iran and to teach people how to do the 12 steps so they can teach others. And I'm just talking to some people in India about doing a 12-step teaching workshop for 200 nuns who are working in rehabs. And what's interesting is that AA doesn't endorse or affiliate with any outside organisation. But we can teach people how to teach others, and we can bring an awareness to people who work with alcoholics. So a large part of what we do is working with professional community and encouraging them to understand. We don't teach them what alcoholism is, but we do help them to understand what the 12 steps can do. So I've been in Vladivostok. This last year I've been in Vladivostok. I've been in India. I've been in Lake Baikal, Irkutsk, and I've been up in northern Mongolia in Sukhothai.
Right. And what are these communities like up there? What do they do up there? What industry is there? Is it forestry? Is it smelting? Is it mining? What are they doing up there? And
well, in Vladivostok, it's a huge city.
Yeah, it's
but,
a big city.
We had people come 1,200 miles to attend our workshop,
right.
and I met some beautiful women who are about 3'5", 3'6", from Chukotka, and they are reindeer herders.
Right.
They are Eskimos.
And they have an alcohol problem.
Oh, 90% of the people in their community are alcoholics.
Are out of it.
Yeah. And
why is that?
well, once it starts, of course, it becomes endemic. But in many cases, they were given alcohol by the government, and in Russia that is the case. And the government supplied alcohol, and in fact, the word for alcohol is vodka is water, same. So not everybody becomes an alcoholic.
No.
But those that do certainly take it on board.
90% of the population's a bit nasty, yeah.
That's in a very small community,
Yeah,
but then they're genetically all related, so they probably
have the gene. Well, I have the gene. My great-grandfather, my father, my uncle, everybody have the alcoholic gene, and I have the alcoholic gene as well.
Well, I think it's there's no doubt, and it's I don't have an opinion about alcoholism in particular communities, but it was a real eye-opener for me to go home to my hometown when I'd been sober for a while and go to a meeting, and to sit with Maori people who'd just come out of prison, and people who were, solo mothers who'd been, on sickness benefits, and I had never experienced.
You were not aware of that community when you were in that place.
But
yes.
when I sit next to them, I realise I'm just the same, and there's a humility in that, which has been it's made my life.
It affected you that deeply?
It's made my life.
Yeah. I find that the cluelessness of the aristocracy or the educated elite against the people that do the work and get up every day and fill your cans and take away your trash or whatever is just huge. I mean, the conception that they are so much better or so different to these people.
I think that exists, but to be honest, Jack, I never saw myself as being an educated elite because,
but you obviously were, because when you went back, you suddenly. Opened up to this experience that you didn't know existed with these people.
I never felt a part of any community at all until I sat down with, some Maori guy who just got out of prison, and then I felt the language of the heart. We talk about the language of the heart, and I recently in Russia had a very exceptional experience with a man who had suffered his entire life with schizophrenia and mental illness. He'd been in prison, and he and another woman who was in her 60s who told me she was dishonest, and I was able to identify with her and say, well, you know, none of us were born dishonest. None of us were born criminals. You know, things happened, and our reactions to them made us who we are now. But we don't have to keep going like that. You know, we can reach out and help someone else, and we can feel better about ourselves, and that's how I live.
Yeah, I know the people in Russia. I mean, the machismo culture. I'm sure is very similar to when I grew up in Scotland. Is it a problem with the men, or do they actually, like, if they're at the meetings, they're there to learn, they're there to sort the problem?
Alcoholics Anonymous is a program of attraction rather than promotion. I mean, we make the information available, and if people want to come, they usually have a problem.
So it's up to them. They've got it.
So I've never met anybody in a meeting who really wasn't an alcoholic. Usually, I mean, people can go away and say AA isn't for me, but at some part of them, in some part of their heart, they know that.
They've got a problem, or they wouldn't be.
So it's a very humbling experience, and you know, I've been to meetings, attended meetings all over the world now, and I think there's a commonality, and that is a mutual respect for the fact that, you know, we all have the same joy of being alcohol free and the same history, and we say listen to the similarities, and if I listen long enough, I will always find a similarity, and it doesn't seem to matter what language anybody's speaking. So, you know, at the World Service meeting, it was wonderful to listen to the stories, and you know, it didn't matter whether people were from Japan or South America. The stories are the same.
People are the same all over the world.
Yeah.
And this is always the same story. I'm
sure.
And
we get well by you know, by helping other people and by sharing our experience.
And using your experience and your own pain and fear to help someone else, and therefore by expunging yourself, you help them.
To some degree, yes.
Okay. Megan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for
letting
me share.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm blown away. Whoever enjoyed that, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.